Okay, when you're ready.
Fantastic. And I'm going to, once I have control of my screen again, I'll start now. Should I take it away, Benjamin?
It's fine.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for giving me this time today to talk about very briefly about what is a research software engineer. This is the first of 3 short talks. So I'm planning on elaborating on this over the next 2 days. So my name is Kim Martin. I'm currently a postdoc at Stellenbosch University, but I'm also an SSI fellow. So the Software Sustainability Institute, which is based in the UK, it's got funding from all of the major research councils in the UK. I was awarded my fellowship in January 2022, and I was one of the first 3 international, so not UK-based fellowships awarded. And my funding was awarded for a proposal which was aimed at raising the profile of RSE in South Africa, which is what I've been working on for the last 2 years. In terms of what is an RSE, or research software engineer, so the term RSE was coined by the Software Sustainability Institute about 10 years ago. And this was on the recognition that research is increasingly dependent on software, and such software requires people who combine professional software expertise with an understanding of research. So the rationale for coining the term, so why invent a new term for this, where there were actually many people already doing the kind of work that has been considered to be research software engineer work, is that when the SSI did a study of academic job adverts, trying to understand how people get into different roles that relate to software development, they discovered a whole bunch of, like, let's say, almost 200 different job titles. Now, the problem with this is when people don't have a clear job title, if the term for what they do bounces around, but as each time they change, and with the academic careers, you tend to jump around. You can jump around fairly quickly in the early stages. This can lead to a problem with having no really recognizable career path. So if, one day you're a postdoc, and then, the next role you're a scientific programmer, and the next one you're a research fellow, it becomes pretty difficult to chart a clear path and to make it clear that you have a clear path when you're talking to future employers. Without a career path, there's no real job security. Academia can be quite bad for this anyway. But it's particularly bad again if it doesn't look like you've been following a particular track. And if there's no job security for people with the kind of skills that I'm going to be talking about today, there's no real future in academia. I mean, most people will only tolerate sort of the uncertainty of not really being clear where their career is going for so long. And that being the case, then people like that are lost from academia. They go to industry, they go to other places. And this is a real loss for academia, that with having let's say no sustainable supply of expertise, you're just bleeding out people with these skills, and research suffers as a consequence. So the UK RSE Society has sort of made it clear that people could be considered research software engineers, or could or should consider themselves research software engineers, if they even if they don't have the title formally, but if they meet certain characteristics. So, for example, they say, if you answer yes to many of the following questions, you're doing the work of a research software engineer already. So, are you employed to develop software for research? Are you spending more time developing software than conducting research? Are you employed as a postdoc, even though you're basically spending your time on software development rather than more traditional forms of research? Are you considered the person who does computers in your research group? Are you sometimes not named on research papers despite playing a fundamental part in developing the software used to create them? Now, this is something that the SSI, the Software Sustainability Institute, and other organizations are working on changing. And then again, do you lack the metrics needed to progress in your academic career? Things like, oh gosh, that's interesting. I would prefer it if people didn't try and annotate my screen while I was presenting. Do you lack the metrics needed to progress your academic career, like papers and conference presentations, despite having made a significant contribution through software? And just to make it clear, it's quite possible to present papers and do conference presentations which focus on RSE, and I've done that. But there is an argument that this is not as easy as it should be. And again, progress is being made at the moment. So I would define RSEs as people who have developed software engineering skills and are distinguished by having some research background or understanding. So I have learned that not all RSEs come from a research background necessarily, but people can come from outside academia to become RSEs and develop that understanding while they're in their role. RSEs typically, and I think this is a key feature, work to advance research by collaborating with other domain experts. So the RSEs would be bringing their software engineering expertise, but also their ability to collaborate closely with other domain experts in highly technical research fields. And this is not something that any given software engineer from a more conventional background could do. Great news is that an RSE does have the potential of developing a conventional academic career. This has been shown, for example, by Sheffield University, which recently appointed a professor of research software engineering, who I now believe has actually gone on to Cambridge. In terms of what does an RSE do, so I learned about RSE for the first time at an R language conference in 2021. So it was a keynote talk by Heidi Seibold, which was describing RSEs by what they do. And this was a bit of an epiphany for me at the time, because I realized that the things that she was talking about to define RSEs were the kind of things that I was already basically doing a lot of in my postdoc role. And they were also things that I cared about and wanted to do more of and wanted to do better. So this became quite a sort of turning point for me, where I decided that this was something that I wanted to pivot my career in towards, as opposed to my background, which is in biomedical research, lab-based biomedical research. So putting this again in context, the Software Sustainability Institute has this manifesto. They basically say that researchers need training in basic software best practices. So like the basics of coding and the basics of using version control and sharing their work and packaging things in such a way that they can be shared with other researchers and used to be advanced research. The SSI also believes that software should be accepted as a valid research output and included in metrics. And this has ramifications in terms of people's careers. So again, they say there should be reward and recognition for the people who develop and maintain research software and the means to fund their involvement in research. And again, there's been a lot of advocacy and concrete progress that has been made in this area by the SSI and other organizations over the past 10 years. Giving examples of the kind of things that RSEs can help with. And now these are examples that have come from my talking to people directly in Stellenbosch University to get a real sense of, at my university, what are the problems? And people have talked about things like having lacking review of code prior to publication. And now this has potentially massive reputational risks if there are errors in published code. And there have been some high profile, I don't think it's Stellenbosch, but there have been some high profile cases where code has gone out with errors and the academics' careers have not fared well as a result. Another problem is poor quality code, which is difficult to understand or maintain. And this is often the case when software is being written by people who have learned by themselves in a sort of ad hoc way. They haven't managed to develop best practices. They haven't managed to engage with people with more skills who can help guide them. So people do their best, but as a result, they are writing amateur code. The downside of this is a loss of time and a loss of potential for reuse, reinventing the wheel. If a new researcher comes in after the old postdoc leaves and they can't make head or tail of the software the last postdoc wrote, it's unlikely that they're going to really be able to fix it up. They're more likely to sort of basically start from scratch, which is a terrible waste. Imagine all the research funds that have gone towards that kind of thing and then basically been put in the toilet. Another problem is lack of coding skills, again, which limits people's ability to generate, manage, and utilize their data. And again, this is an opportunity cost. It limits the scope of research and including the potential impact that a researcher's research could have. And now the other side of the coin would be the advantages of working with research software engineers. So I sort of say, this is a little bit flippant, but sort of do research better, faster, have more success in winning larger grants. This is if you're showing that you're aware of the best practices around software engineering, if software engineering is included in your proposed work, and that you understand what it takes, or you know how to hire the people who understand what it takes to make sure that your software is usable in the longer term. more fame, so more citations of your work if there's usable code associated with it, and less risk of notoriety. So, hopefully less risk of retractions due to errors in research code. And this is only these kind of pressures to, get support from RSEs for this kind of work. And also the sort of advantages of having an awareness of RSE when it comes to writing grant applications is only going to, these pressures are only going to increase as time goes on, because there is this ongoing trend to open science. And part of this involves people wanting to see the source code that has been made available, that, sort of anything to do with the processing of your data or your simulations you've been running. People want to be able to see the code, inspect it, rerun it themselves, make changes to it. And all of these things will benefit from having a professional as an RSE as part of the team. And talking about teams now, there's this concept of RSE groups, which I got very excited about, once I started doing my deep dive after I learned about RSEs. So an RSE group comprises of a number of RSEs who work for researchers across an organization. It's a winning formula that allows researchers only to access the professional software engineering expertise that they pay for, but they only need to pay for what they need. So, and often a researcher who's busy writing grants and trying to get students and postdocs on board, they can't actually hire a full-time software engineer with the funds that they have, and they maybe don't need a full-time software engineer. The benefits of having access to an RSE group in a university is that our researchers can go and ask for part-time RSE time. They can say, look, I need half an RSE's time for the next 3 months to do a particular thing, and that makes a lot more possible for researchers who have that kind of opportunity available to them. So the history of RSE groups, they were first formed at UK universities beginning in 2012, which is just when that RSE term was coined. There are over 40 RSE groups in the UK now, and a growing number internationally. Some examples of I'd say exemplar RSE groups at universities outside Africa, and so far there've not been much in the way of RSE development inside Africa, but I think that's now rapidly changing. But yes, Oxford, Cambridge, Newcastle, Sheffield, Aalto in Finland, Princeton and Harvard in the USA. These are universities that have RSE groups available to the researchers who are based there. And the benefits, again, of RSE groups is the RSEs get stable careers, peer group recognition and development. Research projects get flexible access to expertise, access to niche skills that aren't present in the RSE, in the research group itself. And researchers get help and advice, training, infrastructure support, all sorts of good things like that. And the University of Sheffield, giving an example of one group that has started, this one started a fairly sort of grassroots way with one member of staff, ran some initiatives involving training and consulting and demonstration projects, and then got increasing funding and support after that, and has been going from strength to strength. And following along those lines, so say inspired by what I've been learning from connecting with RSE groups in the UK. So RSE at Sun is the Research Software Engineering Initiative at Stellenbosch University. And the purpose of RSE Sun is to provide these sort of 4 pillars of what I consider the fundamentals of what RSEs give a university. So training researchers in coding, providing consultation, including consultation to help researchers write grants that involve RSE work, giving coding support, so actually writing the software for researchers when they don't have the skills themselves, and then also community building. And just to give sort of, examples, so when it comes to training researchers in coding, the Carpentries is this nonprofit organization that trains people to train researchers in these basic skills. It's comprises of software carpentry, data carpentry, library carpentry. These have different focuses to them. But they basically give basic fundamental computational skills to researchers, including things like how to use the Unix shell, how to use Git, and how to use R or Python. And these lessons are made available under an open license, so anyone has access to them. But if you want to run a certified carpentry course, you must be an instructor. And I'm one of the instructors as of 2021. And I've run with collaborators several carpentry workshops, and the plan is to run more of the future at Stellenbosch University, working in collaboration with the library. Consultation is another thing that I believe is a key pillar of RSE support for researchers. And this is something that I've been providing through an SSI-funded consultation pilot project. And basically, I put out the opportunity for free RSE consultation for researchers in my university, with the idea that they would be able to get some text that they can put into their grant applications, and also some support in how to identify the right person with RSE skills, even if they're not called an RSE at this point, in South Africa that would be able to do their work for them. In terms of coding support and engagements and also community building, I'm still working on pilots there, but things are looking interesting. But now to sort of move forward, I was very interested in learning more about how our proper RSE groups, shall I say, the established RSE groups work. So last year, I went on a tour of the UK and I visited a number of universities and a number of different groups. I was particularly interested in things that work for these groups. And this is, with the eye of how to continue developing RSE at Sun. But then I also realized that it's very important to have an understanding of how the organizational environment affects RSE. So as an RSE, what is it about your context, the university you're in, the type of contract you have, all of these kind of things? What is it about your environment that helps you do your best work and develop to your maximum capacity? So these would be things like management practices, working environment, and training and career opportunities. So to that end, I visited 14 different universities, 25 RSE groups, and I did over 100 interviews. And I still have a lot of work to be done to finish the analysis and publication of the results from this trip. But I did take out a number of lessons. So for example, internal group practices that do work for RSEs. These be things like things that help with quality control and continuing professional development. So code review, which you work with someone who's maybe more skilled than you, or maybe the same level, but you're able to sort of bounce ideas off each other and give each other a little bit of support and sort of a second eye over your code. And working together wherever possible. And this is particularly important because I find that in academia, it doesn't seem like we are often rewarded or encouraged or trained in how to work together, where these are key skills for outside academia. And it does seem important to have the ability to step between academia and industry and bring skills and attitudes from one domain to the other. Things like book clubs and tech talks is also something that people spoke very highly of when they were members of these RSE groups. And then there were different types of management practices. So people talked a lot about agile, which is sort of very light but frequent touch management style, where people engaged frequently with their manager and with their colleagues to make sure that as soon as there was something where someone was stuck or struggling, there was the ability for other members of the team to engage with them and help them move things forward. So these are the benefits of being part of an RSE group, as opposed to being an RSE who's basically working by yourself on a project by yourself. I realize I'm already going over time, but Benjamin did let me know I could, so I'm going to take advantage of that. So another thing I learned from this trip was the diversity of RSE origins. So I was expecting RSEs to sort of have a certain number of characteristics. I was basically expecting people with a PhD who decided they liked software and started writing more software, and this was the sort of the direction. But it seems that there's a lot of sort of stereotypical features that aren't actually true in practice, because I met people in these RSE groups who didn't match many of these characteristics. A lot of people had actually come through, had either hadn't come from academia at all or had left academia for time in industry and before returning back and joining the RSE group. The diversity of the group varied depending on other aspects of the group. So for example, if there was a group that was more focused on medical stuff, it tended to be more specialists from that. Or if there was a group that was focused on a particular type of technology, they might come more from industry with that experience. But as I said, it was heartening to see that it's not like one size fits all. Everyone has to have come from a particular place. And industry experience, incidentally, was considered very valuable. But it was interesting how many people had left industry to come back for the RSE role. HPC, given that this is now a summer school that's partly hosted by the CHPC, just to highlight that HPC skills overlap with RSE skills quite heavily. So I noticed that the larger teams in the UK, often they worked with the HPC systems teams, but in some smaller groups, the RSEs themselves were doing a lot of the HPC system maintenance and also working directly with users. And in terms of opportunities, which I'll be elaborating on in a future talk, just to highlight that there's an ongoing project to develop a training program that combines RSE and HPC necessary skills. So I think that's something that'd be very exciting. Another thing I learned is that different people want different things. And this was in the course of talking to, say, over 100 people. that some people wanted to remain in an RSE role and didn't want to have to think about academic metrics or worry about grant funding. And that is a potential for people taking an RSE role. Some people, though, wanted to be able to move back into a more traditional academic role in the future, and I believe that is and should be possible. And also, some people wanted to move into industry after they'd spent some time as an RSE. And again, I believe that is and should be possible. Something that I've elaborated on other talks. And then just as a sort of highlighting what I think is the right kind of attitude for an RSE group to have when it comes to hiring RSEs, particularly beginners. This is now Aalto Scientific Computing. They're based in Finland. And if you look at the last line of their recruitment spiel on their website, they were specifically looking for people who were interested in going to a scientist developer kind of role in a company, but need more experience before they can make that transition. So that, I think, is quite an exciting way to pitch someone to join an RSE group as looking at it as a way of opening up their options for future career moves. Talking about what comes next. So these will be the next talks that I'm planning on giving over the next 2 days. So tomorrow I'm planning on talking about why you should consider RSE as a career. And then the following day, I plan on talking about how to develop a career as an RSE. So just to say thanks to the Software Sustainability Institute for funding for the road trip and many other forms of support. The RSE community, which has given me much advice and input, and also funding to attend and present at their conferences in the past. The RSE groups for hosting me, the people who volunteered to be interviewed, my bosses for giving me the time, NETEX for endless support and encouragement. And then also for those of you listening, thank you very much for your time, and feel free to email me or maybe a look at those other links for more ways of getting involved with the RSE community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim, for that very important talk for everyone that is obviously in research. So one thing that came up in the chat was how do we join the organization? Can anyone from any profession join? And are there any prerequisites to join the organization? Maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
I think at the moment it's very egalitarian. There have been attempts at making sure that the RSE community is as inclusive as possible. I think in part because it's been quite difficult to nail down exactly what an RSE is, because there's such a diversity of skills and roles that people play within this broad umbrella of people with software skills and research understanding. So to answer the question of how to get involved, you see the last 2 links on this slide here. So RSE Africa, and the interesting thing about the extra S there is it's research, software, and systems engineers. So that's more people on the HPC side. RSE Africa is free to join. They have been holding some very good events to try and build national and international community across Africa. And then the international RSE Slack, I would highly recommend joining. Again, it's free to join. That is the community that, as I say, there's a lot of UK people in there, but also increasingly people from other countries. And the talk there is along the lines of advocating for RSE and then also some technical stuff. So it's a nice place to get a sort of finger on the pulse of what the RSE community is talking about. And I would highly recommend joining both of those. I think RSE Africa now has a LinkedIn group as well. So if you're a LinkedIn person like I am, I'd recommend joining that. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, I think that did. Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you so much, Kim, and we will continue tomorrow for the next part of your talk. I will share your slides with everyone on Canvas so they can see it if there's anything else that they missed. But thank you so much, Kim.
Great. Thank you so much, Benjamin. And to everyone, enjoy the rest of the summer school. Very exciting opportunity you have. Bye then.